Can a keto diet kill you? Hi, I'm Dr. Eric Westman, and welcome back to my channel where I review and debunk nutritional misinformation online. In this video, Dr. Stephen Loam, who is part of Lifestyle Medicine, which is a group that thinks that plant-based eating is the best ever and for everyone, he is going to take apart the keto diet and prove how it kills you, or maybe not. Wait till the end and we'll see my final thoughts.
Ketogenic diet can absolutely kill you. This is Stephen Loam, lifestyle medicine cardiologist, and in this video I'm going to tell you that the ketogenic diet can absolutely kill you. We're going to go through what the ketogenic diet is, the science behind the risks that the ketogenic diet has, and then what you should be doing really to get yourself healthy, lose weight, and live a long, healthy life.
I was reminded of a Quentin Tarantino film with all the blood. Never seen that in my office. Oh, it's just trying to grab your attention.
All right, let's go. The ketogenic diet can increase the risk of heart attack, increase the risk of stroke, and increase the risk of many different types of cancers.
Hey, wait a sec. The language has changed. Not that it kills, it increases the risk of. We're moving a little away from the evidence that it kills you. It increases your risk, perhaps. Interesting change of language.
So what is a ketogenic diet? Well, it's a diet that's really low in carbohydrates, about 5 to 10% of calories, that is higher in protein, about 20 to 25% of calories from protein, and very high in fat, about 70 to 80% of calories from fat. Things like fruit are completely avoided. Same with potatoes, beer, rice, bread, sugar. All the high carbohydrate foods are completely excluded.
Well, there are many ways to teach a keto diet, and I have to admit that if someone's wanting to have a beer or alcohol or liquor, they can, even in the context of a keto diet. And if someone chooses to do a keto vegetarian diet, they can. You just avoid eating the meat. So it's actually a lot more flexible than that. But it's true that it's low in carbohydrates for sure.
This puts you into a state of ketosis where your fuel for your body is changed away from glucose over to ketones. Same thing that happens when somebody is starving.
You know, I thought about that a lot. When someone's starving, well, that's usually not a good thing, right? If someone is unable to get food, if God forbid, you know, that will happen to you, that you can't get access to food. But what kind of creator of a machine or evolutionary pressure would allow the body to start self-destruct itself when there was no food around? So this idea that ketosis is starving, is terrible for you, actually think of it the other way. It might actually be protecting you or be the safe mode. Like on my phone, it says low battery. Do you want to go into safe mode? There actually may be some economies that are happening when you're a fat burner. He's right. When the glucose and sugar and starch come down from the diet, your body shifts over to using fatty acids, and those fatty acids can make ketones. You can make them internally in your body. And you know, even Dr. Loam's going to be happy that he can be a keto fat burner if he can't get access to food for a couple days. I mean, that's just the way we all are.
Now let's see what some of the major authorities have to say about the ketogenic diet. Let's start with the U.S. News and World Report rankings. Drum roll, please. 24th out of 24, dead last in regards to overall diets for heart health.
So remember, this is the science behind it, right? Keto kills. Well, the U.S. News and World Report would not be the first place I would go. Actually, I'm on the panel. Yeah, I'm on this panel that he's quoting, and I didn't rank keto last. Yeah, I didn't rank it first either, but it was not at last for me. I wish they had had the individual judges' evaluations of all the reports put out there for everyone to see, in addition to the conflicts that everyone had. So just like if more judges are there in the Olympics from the US than from another country, it's likely that that gymnast from the US was best and gets the gold medal. So that's why there's someone from every country. There's no over-representation. If you look at the people who are on this panel, there are a lot of conflicts. I have them too, but you would see that my evaluation of the diet is, for a lot of the one, even the vegan one, is not very lopsided. It's not, my evaluation was not heavily biased, but I bet others were, because we have several keto friendly or doctors who are on the panel, and what's happening is if you only show the average, then this one's going to look bad, because the other people again, I haven't seen the average or the individual report, but I bet the people who are unaware of the science behind keto still think that there is something bad in it, and it apparently kills. But no. But again, that wouldn't be my first lead in the evidence that keto kills, to go to a report based on expert opinion.
And of course, heart disease is the most important thing. Heart disease has been the #1 cause of death in the United States every single year since 1919. They say, who should not try the ketogenic diet? How about pregnant women, children without epilepsy, people with certain types of cancer, people with heart disease, high-performing athletes shouldn't try this diet.
So we tried to remove any sort of biased language that favored one diet over another. I think the vegan diet should be prevented in people with pregnant women, children with epilepsy, or without epilepsy even. There are nutritional deficiencies that have been shown for that. But again, this is an expert opinion, and the averages are shown. But again, would you go to the U.S. News and World Report?
Health risks are very significant. Brain fog, mood swings, constipation, high cholesterol, which could cause heart attack, stroke, and death, kidney problems, liver problems, nutrient deficiencies. Mayo Clinic's verdict?
Oh, so hang on. All those problems, of course, being shown without the balance of the good things. How do you put that into context? How do you evaluate if the risks and the benefits are worth it? So that's too bad. The U.S. News and World Report is still pretty biased in terms of the people on the panel. The conflicts and the individual results should be available for public review, in my opinion.
Mayo Clinic's verdict? Very big concerns for long-term heart health.
So the Mayo Clinic, like many organizations, even the Academy of Pediatrics, confuses the diet that I use, which reverses type 2 diabetes and obesity and has its roots back to the Banting diet and the Frederick Allen and Osler diet, confuse the diet we use and advocate and use in the clinic that has research behind it, confuse it with the epileptic diet, the ketogenic diet for epilepsy. It's very different in its application, and it's very different in the playing out in the percentage of fat and how the lipids look. It's very different actually in the consequence of whether you fall off the diet. You have to be very strict with the epilepsy diet with a patient, because if they fall off, they'll have a seizure. If we are doing this for diabetes reversal or weight loss, if you fall off, well, your blood sugar goes up or you don't lose weight that day, the consequence is not so dire as for the epilepsy diet.
According to Harvard, this comes with serious risk. Not to mention raccoon eyes. Who wants those?
I've never heard of raccoon eyes. I never heard of keto crotch. And that actually was something put out by media companies. So again, as a theme, if you watched me before, if you want information about a keto diet, ask someone who's an expert in it. If you want information about a vegan diet, ask someone who's an expert in it, not someone who's an expert in a different diet. So we're seeing a lot of calls to authority here. The authority really doesn't have experts who know about the diet, or if they do, then they're overwhelmed by other experts and drowned out in the kind of judging like the U.S. News and World Report. Now the American Institute of Cancer Research, I went to one of their meetings and learned that it was really just a bunch of vegetarians together talking about how vegetarian diets are great. So again, it was a biased sample of people, and that's great, but they can't really say much about other types of diets.
The American Institute for Cancer Research says no cancer organizations recommend the ketogenic diet for cancer patients with cancer or for prevention of cancer. And just the opposite. The American Cancer Society recommends a diet with a variety of vegetables, dark green vegetables, red, orange, fiber-rich beans and peas and lentils, fruits, especially whole fruits, in a variety of colors, and whole grains. That's like the opposite of the ketogenic diet. You know, anytime a diet tells you you can't eat an apple, you know there's something wrong. An apple a day keeps a doctor away. And if you eat only one apple, guess what? You're no longer on the ketogenic diet. Too many carbs.
Well, so it depends what you're trying to accomplish. If you're trying to lower the glucose and insulin in someone's body to reverse insulin resistance, yeah, the apple's not a great thing to have. You might have a quarter of an apple. So they're not forbidden, but actually some restaurants will give you a wafer-thin slice of an apple with some cheese on it, so the cheese protects you against the sugar, so to speak. But the idea that plant-based diets or vegetarian diets are better for cancer really is not scientific. Oh, but wait, I thought this was a keto kills. Have we found that out yet?
To understand how the ketogenic diet ends up increasing heart disease and stroke risk, if your LDL is high, your cholesterol is high, you can clog your arteries more. The other thing is your arterial endothelium, the lining of your arteries. If it gets damaged and inflamed, cholesterol can build up there. And look at all these gray boxes at the top. Genetic determinants of arterial wall biology, high blood pressure, inflammation, smoking, and other things like diabetes can damage that artery lining.
Exactly. So actually, LDL in this theory doesn't become a player until there's damage by inflammation, smoking, diabetes, hypertension, and that thing called genetics that you can't fix. Some families never get atherosclerosis even when they eat bad, or what we call bad diets. It's just not fair, I know. But among all of these things, diabetes is the major player. If you have type 2 diabetes, and you haven't reversed it by diet or drug or surgery, yeah, weight loss surgery will reverse type 2 diabetes. That's kind of extreme, but a diet like I teach reverses type 2 diabetes all the time. You want to focus on reversing the diabetes, fixing the smoking, reversing the hypertension, rather than worrying about the LDL, because the LDL won't become a player, an issue, unless you have that original damage on the arterial wall. Here it is, that the cause really is not LDL, it's these other things, and LDL in this story becomes sort of the mediator of how it all happens and gets worse. Could you change the LDL and reduce things? Yeah, I think you can with drugs. You can reduce risk. Sometimes it's not a big reduction. And certainly if you're eating a typical American diet, you might want to be on a medicine to reduce the cholesterol levels, because that's the context of those diets. Those are people who eat carbs. So if you're eating a bad diet, you might need drugs to fix the bad diet. Well, why not try something different, which is to change the diet or the lifestyle. You fix these other boxes in the gray area there, then you won't have damage from any LDL that's there. So this is a very interesting area, because there are some people who have extreme high elevations of LDL on a low-carb keto diet, and most people don't. Most people have reductions in total cholesterol, LDL, triglyceride, and even elevation in the good cholesterol, called HDL. So when you look across the board, most people have improvements of all of those things. Maybe it's because of the weight loss that occurs with it, but I don't think it's entirely that, because even when people reach their goal, the cholesterol levels will be, quote, in the normal range. So the minority of people, I don't know exactly how many it is, maybe 1%, have an extreme elevation of LDL on a low-carb keto diet. We don't know if that's bad yet. It's undergoing studies right now, but that sort of very minority effect has been overgeneralized to say that everyone going on a keto diet will have an elevated level of cholesterol. It's just not true. So, but again, how does this kill you?
So what in your diet raises your blood cholesterol numbers? What raises your LDL cholesterol? Eating cholesterol, eating saturated fats, and eating trans fats. Cholesterol's not an essential nutrient. You don't need to eat any. Every cell in your body can make its own cholesterol.
So hang on. You don't need to eat any cholesterol. Your body can make cholesterol. Every cell can make cholesterol. Well, yeah, that's because it's so important. When you look at cholesterol as a molecule, it's very difficult to make. There are all of these different steps along the way. You can take drugs to stop the cholesterol production in your cells. But if you eat less cholesterol, your body just makes more of it. It's so important. So I've heard that used both ways. I mean, we will say, well, carbohydrate's not an essential nutrient, meaning your body can make all of it by itself. That was reassuring to me when I started asking people not to eat carbohydrate. The same thing could be said about it. Cholesterol is not an essential nutrient. Your body can make all of it that it needs, but it's very time and effort and energy consuming to make cholesterol inside the body. I'd prefer to eat it, so my body doesn't have to use its precious resources to make cholesterol. I want it to be fighting infection or healing other parts of the body. So it's interesting to see how that same idea can be used in both ways.
And if any of those saturated fat conspiracy theorists ever say to you, oh, saturated fat doesn't matter, don't worry about it, don't worry about that at all, check out this white paper by the True Health Initiative. Walter Willett, a Harvard nutrition expert, David Katz from Yale, they put together this great document really showing how important it is to avoid saturated fat and how it leads to heart disease risk.
When I reflect on what's going on here, Dr. Lohm is using the appeal to authority in many cases, right? This organization, that organization, this True Health Initiative organization, the people on the author list are quite conflicted by their affiliation with certain type of diet. And the True Health Initiative, to become a member, I was with another colleague, academic, at that website, and this colleague said, well, you should join Dr. Westman. And I said, well, okay, let me see if I can join the True Health Initiative. So I go there and I type in how to join, and basically you have to take a pledge that the plant-based diet is the best diet for everyone. And so that my colleague, younger colleague, said, you can't sign that. You don't know that. They don't know that. Okay, so I didn't join. So, but the appeal to authority, even they can write papers that say, plant-based is best, or Ansel Keys in the 7-country study is such a flawed study. If you really need to go back that far, read Gary Taub's Good Calories, Bad Calories, or read Nina Teicholz's What If It's a Big Fat Lie. This is just not modern day science and should not be used as credible evidence by today's standards.
And this is backed up by a statement from the Institute of Medicine, also known as the National Academy of Medicine, saying that they did not set a limit for how much cholesterol you could eat, how much saturated fat you could eat, or how much trans fats you could eat, because any amount that you eat above 0% of your energy is going to increase your LDL cholesterol numbers.
Time out. Take a look. What date is that? Oh, well, let's see. This is a video which is in 2023. The date is removed from this abstract. So I looked it up. It's 2011. So now we're citing old data, old papers. The new guidelines for many organizations actually say saturated fat is not a problem. And there's even a Cochrane review in the medical world that reviews all the evidence, and the paper, the meta-analysis that shows saturated fat shows that the largest study that we know of to date, the Women's Health Initiative, lowered the saturated fat, and it didn't have any improvement in outcomes. So in a prospective manner, the hypothesis here was not shown to be true. Curious that also eating more saturated fat raises your good cholesterol. Those are papers done by Jeff Volek, V-O-L-E-K, and his group at UConn. It used to be UConn, now at Ohio State University. So actually, if someone says, you want to raise your cholesterol, what you want to say is, or will lower your cholesterol, you want to say which one? Or, well, if I lower the cholesterol, will I be lowering my good cholesterol? And even now, the drug treatment doctors say, well, HDL doesn't matter as much because there's no drug that can lower it or raise it that improves or reduces outcomes. But this has been shown over and over and over, and elevated HDL is a good thing to have, even though there aren't medications to change it.
Let's shift away from cholesterol and talk about the inflammation and damage to the artery lining. Animal-based foods versus plant-based foods. How do they play out? Well, again, ketogenic diet is very animal heavy, animal protein heavy. And when we look at what animal proteins do to inflammation in your artery health, TMAO, trimethylamine oxide, heterocyclic means, heme iron, Nu5G, advanced glycylation end products, and endotoxins are all produced when you consume animal-based proteins. And all of those things in different ways damage the artery lining and cause inflammation. But when you get plant-based sources of protein, you've got fiber, vitamin C, and lots of different phytonutrients which are anti-inflammatory and help the health of your artery lining, lowering your risk of heart disease. How does this play out?
So that looks really convincing, doesn't it? Until there's a head-to-head trial, of these theories, we really don't know to say which one is better. I think both are good because they don't have junk food in them personally. And even Dr. Aronica at Stanford did a sub-study of the Diet Fits trial where the people eating super low carb were compared to those eating super low fat, and they both had improvements. And so, how does this kill someone? So if you're my patient, I hope you're not worried yet. I'm not.
How does this play out in clinical studies? Well, check out these publications from the Journal of the American Medical Association, 3 of them, which all looked at the same thing. Animal-based proteins versus plant-based proteins. Does it cause heart attacks?
So hold on. We've had a little switch of the conversation, haven't we? So we're talking about animal versus plant protein in what context? A keto diet or in the general population? So what's happening now is, well, if we can't provide evidence that a keto diet kills somebody, we'll talk about LDL cholesterol, because we all know that's bad. And we'll talk about animal proteins, because we all know that's bad. But wait, where's the evidence that someone has died from a keto diet? I mean, I haven't seen it yet. I hope you're getting that kind of detector going to say, well, why haven't we seen it yet?
Does it cause strokes? Does it cause cancer? And your overall mortality rate? What we find is replacement of only 3% of energy from animal protein and giving plant protein instead significantly lowered mortality, especially cardiovascular heart disease mortality.
Many years ago, I wrote a letter to the editor that kind of talked about saturated fat and essential nutrients. And I was able to collaborate with somebody who preferred to be nameless, didn't want to put his name on it. And he remembered back to a time when the food pyramid and the guidelines were made, and he was someone who promoted egg consumption. And he got raked over the coals. He was a biochemist. He did not have the political gumption, if you will, to have his name in the press. He felt embarrassed and all. So he didn't want to be on the letter to the editor I wrote. But he told me, of course, that any abstract or any paper, you want to add these words, under the conditions studied. Brilliant. So here, this isn't a keto diet. They're not talking about a keto diet. Wait, I thought this article was about a keto diet.
The lower overall mortality was actually a lot of it attributed to egg protein and red meat protein. But as we'll see, it's actually all types of animal-based proteins. So let's look at this graph from this study here. And let's see removing which animal-based proteins and substituting a plant-based proteins has the most dramatic reduction in overall risk of dying. This line right here is where it would be neutral. Anything to the left of this line lowers the risk of dying and would favor the plant-based protein source, eating beans and lentils instead of the specific animal-based protein source. So processed red meat was the absolute worst. Don't eat your hot dogs, man. And then unprocessed red meat was still quite significant. That if you removed the unprocessed red meat and instead had plant-based proteins, your mortality went down significantly. But there was even a mortality benefit of removing poultry and removing fish, and a very significant one for removing egg-based protein and dairy-based protein.
So if you've heard me talk about studies before, there should always be an absolute risk reduction and a relative risk reduction in any presentation. This is getting to David Diamond, who talks about the LDL in the treatments, even with drug treatments. They used relative risk to make it look like there was a bigger improvement. So here, this is really kind of uninterpretable because we don't know the absolute risk. And then in what context? So this is not in the context of a keto diet. there's so many different metabolic processes that are changing. You're actually metabolizing fat much better. And in this situation, maybe the meat is not good when you're not in a keto state. Of course, the overgeneralization of, let's say, if it happens to people on an American diet or whatever diet, it must happen on people on a keto diet, that's an overgeneralization. In fact, I think it would be fair to say until you study these medicines that lower cholesterol and change the cholesterol level among those who don't eat carbs, those on a keto diet, you can't say that it's necessarily going to have the same improvements. I mean, until it's studied. It would be like saying things that you know are hormonally based. Well, if it applies in men, it must apply in women. When, no, you really have to study different metabolic states and before you conclude. So remember, under the conditions studied, put that on every abstract last line, every paper last line, and it will help you not overgeneralize.
So again, it's not just the cholesterol and the saturated fat, it's actually the animal-based protein as well, causing inflammation and damage to the artery lining, leading to clogging of arteries, heart attack, stroke, and overall death. But Dr. Loam, on a ketogenic diet, you can lose a ton of weight. Well, of course you can lose a ton of weight. Look what Americans eat. They eat 63% of their calories from processed foods. So anything that gets rid of sugar and refined carbohydrates, you're going to lose a lot of weight on it, right? So it's not necessarily the weight loss that's important. You want to be healthy in the long term. You want to live a long, good life without heart attack, without stroke, without cancer. And you can lose weight doing other things that aren't healthy for you, right? What if we gave you chemotherapy? You're going to throw up. You're not going to be able to eat. You're going to feel miserable. You're going to lose weight. Does that mean chemotherapy is good for you in the long term? Absolutely not. Same thing with becoming a cocaine addict. You can lose a lot of weight if all you did was cocaine and drugs. Is that going to be good for you in the long term in regards to your health? No, it's just like a ketogenic diet.
So hang on. I will get through this. The first time I heard that the keto or Atkins diet was like chemotherapy was by Dr. Dean Ornish years ago. And, you know, so that old hackneyed version, that's been around a long time. But comparing it to an addiction like cocaine, this is getting a little ridiculous, or chemotherapy. The weight loss occurs because you're burning your body fat. If you don't eat carbs for 2 or 3 days, your body starts to burn its own fat. Nothing crazy about that. In fact, a lot of people reduce the fat that they eat in terms of grams per day because they're burning their body fat so well. And in 1 or 2 studies by the same group, so it'd be great if it was done in other independent groups, you actually burn more fat on a keto diet than on a high carb diet, because even though you're eating more fat, you're burning more fat because you're a fat burner. So there's a lot of change that occurs. And I mean, I can politely just say this is kind of offensive to compare the diet in the 2024. Maybe this worked in the year 2001 when I first heard this, and stay tuned. We're actually going to see a clip from 2001. This gets better.
Just because it can make you lose weight doesn't mean it's good for you in the long term. Now let's look at some data in regards to what low carbohydrate ketogenic type diets do to your overall health. Low carbohydrate diets in this study were associated with significantly higher risk of all-cause mortality.
He said low carb ketogenic, and where's keto? Where's ketogenic? Low carbohydrate diets and all-cause. There was really no one in a ketogenic state in this study. We criticize these articles as they're keto-like, or you know, they're not keto, they're kind of keto when they're not at all. But you can kind of slather the name with imprecision. I have to imagine that if someone is doing a study like this, they throw out anyone who says they're not eating carbohydrates as an outlier. They may not even include them in the results. But so this has nothing to do with the keto diet.
And in this study, low carbohydrate dietary patterns favoring animal-based protein as fat sources such as lamb, beef, pork, chicken were associated again with a much higher mortality. Whereas if you had plant-based protein and plant-based fats such as from vegetables, nuts, peanut butter, whole grains, you had a much lower mortality.
You can also, if you read or listen to my videos, observational studies do not prove causation. So these are all now getting into nutritional epidemiology studies. They're not randomized trials, they're not experiments. And you can get an overblow, a very small risk ratio or hazard ratio, that relative risk or even absolute risk thing. And then, everyone believes it because it's from Harvard. Now that's just kind of now Harvard's a big place. There are those who are doing clinical trials that are reasonable with great conclusions. I'm not a big fan of the nutritional epidemiology group at Harvard. One reason is that the nutritional epidemiology group at McMaster University doesn't find the same things. So you could fight epidemiology with epidemiology, say that, or just, these are hypothesis generating kinds of studies that then need to be turned around into prospective studies before you really say there's causation or before there's worry.
Now, how about in patients who have heart disease? That's my area. I'm a cardiologist. Well, if you have heart disease, this study showed a 53% increase in all-cause mortality if you had a low-carbohydrate diet that was high in animal-based proteins. And yet another study showing that switching to the ketogenic diet is associated with increased cholesterol numbers and increased inflammation markers, like we just said, we don't want.
Now, getting into the prospective clinical studies, it's fascinating, because there are people who understand there's a transition period from when you eat carbohydrates to not eat carbohydrates. It's called keto adaptation. And it may take 2 to 4 weeks before that changes totally. In the movie called Serial Killers 2, Cereal, a husband-wife triathlon champion duo, keto adapted and then rode in a rowboat from San Francisco to Hawaii and broke the world's record by 15 days. What they did is they took 6 months and they measured this every month to really see when they were totally fat adapted and could burn fat at the maximal level. It took 6 months. So if you're going to be looking at inflammation or cholesterol levels or anything, you don't want to look at it in just a week or 2 or 4 weeks, which sadly is what's happening in some circles, thinking that short-term change reflects the long-term change. I remember back when the first study of the Atkins diet was 1 week long, and they lost a certain amount of weight, and then they regained all the weight when they started to reintroduce the carbs at a week, or was it 2? I forget. It was a study by Rena Wing. The whole idea was to show that it was water weight. Well, all I had to do is go to a clinic where they were using the diet. I visited Dr. Atkins, and people were on the diet for years and lost hundreds of pounds. It wasn't just the water weight for the long term. Maybe it was during that first week or two. So there are all these pot shots trying to show that it's bad, and I don't fully understand why. I thought people wanted to help other people.
This is why the guidelines from the American College of Cardiology and the American Heart Association for Prevention of Heart Disease show that a plant-based diet is ideal for overall heart health.
It's kind of like that movie Roger Rabbit, where all you have to do is say, shave and a haircut, and then the rabbit comes out of the wall and says 2 bits. I thought this was about keto killing, but of course we have to hear about how plant-based diets are best. So, even if plant-based diets are best, which I don't believe because there's been no head-to-head clinical trial, that doesn't mean keto kills. Again, we're losing sight, we're drifting from the original intent of this video. I'm not convinced yet.
Come on, Dr. Loam, the caveman used to eat this way, right? Well, no, actually they didn't, but even if they did, do you really want to live to be only 35 years old? That was the life expectancy of the caveman. So what should we do? Well, data from Dean Ornish. Here's his lifestyle heart trial published in 1990, which showed that if you took people who had clogged arteries of greater than 50% or more, that the average percentage stenosis blockage regressed, went down if you followed a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet.
Hang on. I know this study really well. I was in training in 1990, and I have to credit Dean Ornish, Dr. Ornish, for putting lifestyle on the map. Nobody was talking about lifestyle, but he's done a disservice by saying his way was the only way. And so here's the paper that launched his career, and let's look now with the lens of 2024. There were 28 people assigned to an experimental group and 20 people to a usual care control group. There were 48 people in the entire study. When you look at a statin trial, there are 20,000 people, or 10,000, or 4,000 in the study who are on a drug in order to see the difference between. There's no possible way that this intervention could have done this. It's so powerful with so little people involved, it would have been replicated over and over and over by other groups, and we never saw that. We never saw a replication of this, and that the hallmark of science is replication. Going back to a study from 1990 is the best evidence that, a plant-based diet can reverse coronary heart disease with also meditation and other kinds of things. It's still not evidence that keto kills.
Versus a control group which actually progressed and worsened their heart disease. So comprehensive lifestyle changes, including a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet, can actually regress and reverse heart disease in just 1 year without the use of medications. So then why then do so many people advocate a ketogenic type diet? There's lots of doctors out there that are saying that you should do this.
Well, hang on. Maybe that can work too. How could that possibly be? Well, if you're trained that eating fat kills you and having high LDL is the scourge of humanity and you should lower it by drugs or lifestyle by any means possible, then of course this is the best, even though it has 48 people in it, has never been replicated. And a keto diet must kill you, right?
It's all about the money. People love to hear good news about their bad habits. You can lose weight this way, but it's not good for you in the long term. And these authors, these people, they sell books, they sell supplements to correct the nutritional deficiencies that their diet causes. And one of the greatest historical examples of that is Dr. Atkins.
Hang on. Yes, I have a book. Yes, plant-based folks have books. Dean Ornish has a book. You don't retire on a book anymore anyway, because of all the things that happen to books. And books are a way to get information out to people. When I visited Dr. Atkins years ago, and we're going to actually see some clips from that era, he was making money, best I could tell, from those supplements that he was selling. Yeah, and what I was told is that his clinic was losing money. And he had to go in and convince the business people to keep the clinic going because he wanted to help the patients. He could have retired many years before. So, and a lot of this information could be gleaned from Jackie Eberstein, who's a nurse that worked with Dr. Atkins back in the day, and she's still around. She's retired now, but I know her pretty well. So let's go back to see what's called an ad hominem attack. We've had appeal to authority. We've had the dumbing down of the heart attack to heart risk, cardiovascular risk. We've had the focus on LDL without the context of whether you're low carb or high carb. Now this is called ad hominem.
And the Atkins diet, who sold millions and millions and millions of books and made millions more money just selling the supplements that he needed to give his patients to correct the nutritional deficiencies that his diet caused.
Now, hang on. I've used the low-carb Atkins type diet for 25 years, and I don't sell supplements because there aren't any nutritional deficiencies that need to be corrected. I think he's carrying that over from the vegan diet, where you have to take B12 supplementation. I remember asking Jackie Eberstein, I visited Dr. Atkins in his office and asked him what he did, and I said, does Dr. Atkins always use the supplements? And she kind of admitted to me, no, there was a time when it was just the diet. So I have to imagine that supplements were introduced to make money, to help people to reduce the need to go to an untested vitamin, for example, something like that. But that's a low, really unsubstantiated statement. And then even then, I'm not sure how many millions he made. How does Dr. Lohm know that? When I was faced with studying this and being at a meeting where a reporter asked me, well, millions of people have done the diet, all these books sold, and I looked at the reporter and I said, just because the books have sold doesn't mean they've done the diet. I mean, just because you buy a book, you might put it under your pillow and you think that it'll help you. I mean, so there's a lot of assumptions here, and you don't take a vitamin to correct a deficiency for this, but I guess you do on other diets.
Dr. Atkins himself ended up having a heart attack, heart failure, and hypertension when his records were accidentally released. And when he passed away, he was 258 pounds.
accidentally released, eh? No, the doctor who surreptitiously asked for the death certificate of Dr. Atkins, without permission, without the family saying it's okay, leaks it to Neil Barnard at the PCRM, Physicians Committee for Responsible Medicine. They leak it into the press. Yeah, the certificate was surreptitiously obtained and leaked into the press, and the vegan group put it into the international news, and everyone heard that Dr. Atkins died of a heart attack. Well, actually, he slipped on the ice in New York City, bumped his head, and bled into the brain, died of a subdural hematoma. Dr. Keith Berkowitz found him. Dr. Keith is a friend of mine who took up a lot of Dr. Atkins' patients in New York City, and yet this gets perpetuated. Mrs. Atkins put out a press release to try to counteract that idea, and of course no one picked it up. It's more sensational to hear that a diet doctor dies of his diet, which is not what happened. And the idea that it was accidentally released, wow, that's a change in the narrative.
Clearly, his diet wasn't working for his own individual health.
Well, so does the theory of relativity or some scientific truth fade away when the person who creates it dies? The ad hominems here because Nathan Pritikin died when he was young, does that mean the Pritikin diet doesn't work? No, it still can. So I don't fall victim to these pot shots. Actually, Dr. Atkins, as I understand it, had a terrible problem with his weight. And he found a diet that would help him personally. And so it's very common, if you're an obesity medicine specialist, people go up and down in their weight and have a big struggle, even though they know what to do. It's not always easy, and it's really, again, I don't know the right polite word, it's offensive that someone would use this information still today that is totally incorrect.
So what does work for long-term weight loss and long-term health? Well, check out this study, the BROAD trial, which put people on a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet, and you had huge improvements in the BMI, cholesterol, and other risk factors. To the best of the researchers' knowledge, this program achieved more weight loss at 6 and 12 months than any other clinical trial has ever shown without limiting calories and without mandating any exercise.
So, the old saying that someone went to a university, how do you know someone went to Duke? Just be around them for a minute and they'll tell you. You could use any university. You could vary that. How do you know someone's following a plant-based diet? Well, just be with them for a minute and they'll tell you. This has nothing to do with the keto diet. Actually, both can coexist as good and healthy ways to live, an alternative to the standard American diet.
A whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet. And this is what the blue zones eat, right? They're a very high carbohydrate diet, but their carbohydrates are coming from fruits and vegetables, beans and lentils, whole grains, nuts and seeds. They were much lower in fat percentage of calories, 20% versus ketogenic, which is 70% or so. And they were lower in proteins, about 15% of calories from proteins. Now, the longest living culture, which is similar to the Ornish diet, was the Okinawans. They were 85% carbohydrates, 6% fat, and 9% protein. So a very low protein diet, a very high carbohydrate diet, and this is what you do for heart disease reversal. Very similar. And those Okinawans, arguably the longest living culture ever described.
So the blue zones, sigh, you can, like an ink blot print, you can see what you want to see in there. It's more complicated than just the diet. The lifestyle in these places is very different than our lifestyle. And one take-home point, when I heard that Dr. Atkins slipped on the ice and died in New York City, I reaffirmed that I want to live in the South where there's no ice, so I'll reduce my chance of slipping on the ice and bumping my head. So there are all these other factors that are going on, and until there are randomized trials going forward, prospective studies, we really don't know which is best, even with all of the hype about the blue zones.
So, what should we do? How do we think about nutrition then? Well, we have three categories of food. We have processed foods, which include all the junk that's obvious, the refined carbohydrates like white flour, white sugar, and added oils and fats. Then the second category of food we have are the animal-based foods, the high-fat ones, the low-fat ones, any of them, meat, eggs, dairy, seafood, cheese. And then we have whole, unprocessed, plant-based foods. What we want to do is remove the processed foods completely and dramatically reduce or eliminate the animal-based foods and focus on a predominantly whole food, plant-based diet. There should really just be one category of food. So avoid the ketogenic diet at all costs. Now, maybe if you were to do a ketogenic diet in a more plant-based fashion, a plant-based keto diet, perhaps it would be better if your cholesterol numbers are down and it's not causing you some inflammation. That might be better, but even with that, there's not a lot of long-term studies to say that that is what you should be doing either. So just stick to a whole food, plant-based, low-fat diet. It's going to help you lose weight, it's going to give you more energy, and it's going to make you live long and live better.
And because plant-based diets are great, keto kills. What logic is that? Please, oh gosh. Jeff Volek, who I've known for 25 years, he's at Ohio State, PhD, double PhD. At a recent conference, I asked, is there any evidence, have you found anything about a low-carb keto diet that makes you worried, that kind of limits the time span that I should use in my clinic? I'm using this today, it's not research, it's the real world, and I've been doing that for over 15 years at Duke. I asked Dr. Volek, should I stop using it? I ask him every year about this. He said no. He said there's no evidence that a low-carb keto diet is harmful. It made me reflect after 25 years in this space. When we did our first study together, our really only study, Jeff Volek and I, we went to the literature and we looked for studies that supported a low-carb diet. And there were some. They were short-term, they were a few weeks, maybe a month, and it looked okay. There were no studies that showed that a low-carb, high-fat diet was bad. There were no studies that showed that an Atkins diet was bad. There never have been any prospective, well-designed studies to show that an Atkins diet kills. Never been. So looking back, in 1980, there was a paper done with the NIH intramural group where they rustled up a bunch of people, did the low-carb group, just one group. I think it might have been 24 people, and everyone lost weight doing an Atkins diet, but the LDL went up just a little bit. In 1980, there was the nail in the coffin. There was an American Heart Association guideline or just an opinion piece that said, this can't be true, it's quackery. And for the next 20 years, nobody studied the low-carb, high-fat diet. Nobody said could find that it was bad. Nobody said it was good until 2002, a year after that great nutrition debate. Our study and Jeff Volek's study, the one I actually presented at the nutrition debate, were published in 2002, starting the evidence that yes, you could lose weight. Subsequent studies showing that you can reverse type 2 diabetes, you actually get people off medication. They've been on diabetes medicines for years. You can reverse so many other things. We have not had any evidence, scientific, even anecdotal. The one lawsuit against Dr. Atkins was thrown out, and it was actually funded by that plant-based group in DC. So the keto, what evidence is there that keto kills? It's all in the heads, the fantasies of those who have certain beliefs. I went to a meeting years ago, and the feeling I had of studying the low-carb, high-fat diets was like leaving Spain, like Christopher Columbus leaving Spain. There were people who said, you're going to fall off the edge of the world. He never did. Best I can tell. I mean, he didn't accomplish everything he wanted, but there were people who thought the earth was flat. And I bet they were looking to make sure that the end of the world wasn't near. So, but that's the feeling I had. And I said, I'm on this boat too, like Christopher Columbus and everyone else. And so we're going to be looking out and make sure that there's no serious issue with this lifestyle, this way of eating, which turns out to be one that's been around a long time. I think veganism was started as a name in the 1940s or something. It's relatively new. Oh, right, but this isn't about veganism. It's about keto killing. So there's a fantasy, it's a prejudice that a low-carb, high-fat diet hurts you or harms you. And it's based on these theories that may work in the context of high-carb diets, or may just be wrong even there. But that threatens so many, the egos, the teaching, the financial interests, the food companies. It threatens so much to say, well, maybe we haven't done it right this whole time. Recently, so I kind of carried this Christopher Columbus thing around probably way too long. Well, I don't want to hurt anybody. I want, as a doctor, I want to help people, and I think we can do that in many different ways. But I was eating at a shrimp restaurant in town, and I looked up, and there was this painting. I couldn't believe it. It was kind of dark in the room at the time, but I showed some light on it. The title of the painting was Christopher Columbus' Last Day. And it showed the Nina, the Pinta, the Santa Maria going off the edge of the earth with the steam coming up, and it didn't happen. It was the fantasy, the creation in people's minds, the prejudice, the idea of carrying over themes and ideas that may not apply at all. So it's just to say there's no evidence in this video or in the other anti-keto videos that keto kills. Yes, people die on lots of different diets. People have medical issues on lots of different diets. It's not a panacea that fixes everything by any means either. So if you stay for the last element here, don't listen to this guy. Talk to a keto expert about a keto diet. Talk to a vegan expert about a vegan diet. I'm not going to talk bad about vegan diets unless it's really egregious, because I think it can be healthy. But somehow they just want to downplay or talk bad about a keto diet. I guess it gets clicks. There's no science in here. And that's really what I want to stay to. Thanks for hanging in there. If you like this, please like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and I'm dropping new videos on Wednesdays and Fridays. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, and check out adaptyourlifeacademy.com.